Hi, I think we should start. We have around 71 participants. So, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome, a very warm welcome to our Looking Back, Looking Forward webinar series. And I hope everyone who has registered or has been able to join this webinar, you're all safe and you all have a positive note in this pandemic, which has kind of affected us in unprecedented ways, really. Things we have seen, we probably have never seen before. So, and with that, I would kind of give you a very brief introduction on the webinar series. So, this series, this Looking Back, Looking Forward series, it's envisaged to kind of look at the entire narrative of safe cities for women movement and globally how in the past, in the present, and into the future, women activists, people from different multidisciplinary background have kind of contributed to this. And the first one, which was the last one, which was the first one of the series, had we had like really pioneers in the field speaking about their experience, about their contribution, challenges, and the kind of strategies they had undertaken to give momentum to this movement. And we had Ana Falu from Argentina. We had Caroline Witzman from Canada. We had Kalpana Vishwanath, our co-founder from here in India. And it was a very kind of very wonderful discussion which we had, which was kind of gave us really great insight about how historically women have contributed to this movement. And some of you who have kind of attended that would know. So the second one, we are kind of, this is the second one, and we are looking at this from in a present perspective, and we cannot like in the present, the kind of times we are living in is like I said, it's unprecedented times. We have never seen something like this before. So we want to look at it from a perspective of the youth, of the young people who have contributed really positively in this field and from different kind of backgrounds. So there are activists, there are architects, there are researchers, academicians, professionals, practitioners, all of them, they have kind of contributed. And it has become, this whole thing has become so interdisciplinary that people have contributed meaningfully from every field of work they have been involved with. So we are going to look at that, and also we are going to look at that what this context really, what kind of challenges does this context kind of throw at us. And since we have seen that in this COVID times that we have seen that there is a rise in domestic violence, there is limited access to women's sexual and reproductive healthcare, and there have been a disproportionate kind of weight on women because of the household work and managing everything else together. So these stories are coming out, and we are kind of increasingly becoming aware of this. They were always there, but because of this COVID thing, it has been kind of highlighted and for all of us to see and kind of reflect on. So I will be giving a question, obviously, to our panelists. Our panelists, we have a fantastic panel here. And please keep tuned in to the last moment, because I promise you that it will be a very great discussion here. Okay, 7 of us, 7 of the panelists from different fields of work, and it will be really good. I'll tell you briefly about Safety Pin as well, that those of you who are not aware of what we do at Safety Pin. So Safety Pin is a technology platform, and it collects safety-related data on cities, both hard infrastructural, physical kind of data, and also soft social dynamics on the cities. It is also seen as a feminist tool, which has given the power to women and users of public space to kind of audit their own neighborhoods, to kind of give their voice and opinion about their own neighborhoods, their perception of cities, and all of that. And thirdly, I would kind of try to say that what really data means to us. today data is central to our lives. It kind of governs our lives in known and unknown ways. But SafetyPin's data has been received very positively by change maker authorities, governments, and municipalities, and all of that, because the data on the real state of the city that can help you in decision making, into analysis of cities, into analysis of public space, and all of that. With that, I will now introduce all the speakers. They have all shared a short bio with us. So I will quickly read, and please stay with us. And after that, one of the things I want to share before that is for everyone that please send your question and answer, if it's for the speaker or the organization or about this webinar, please send it in the Q&A box. Please don't send it in the chat. It becomes difficult to fish out the questions from the chat and respond to them, so that the speakers, when they're not speaking, they can also respond to those questions which are sent to them. Now let me introduce the speakers one by one. So Akriti, one thing, when I'm introducing the speaker, so that people know whom I'm talking about, if you can just raise your hand and wave, people will it will be easier for people to see who it is. So Akriti Kishori, North Delhi Municipal Corporation. Akriti is an architect and urban designer and has been working on cities and communities for the past few years. Her experience lies in streets, transportation, and decongestion strategies in Delhi, Srinagar, and Ambala. She has been actively involved in the Karol Bagh decongestion and pedestrianization project in Delhi, which has been a major step towards making streets safe and accessible to all. She is also part of the team which organizes community initiatives such as Ajmal Khan Street Art Festival and Step Out at Night. Next is Anupama Ray from the Gender Lab. Anupama is a core team member at the award-winning non-profit organization, the Gender Lab, and has experience in facilitating community work for building gender equality. She became part of the Gender Lab family as a fellow, during which she worked with over 600 girls and mentored them to make social change happen in their communities. After completing her fellowship, she initiated the Gender Lab in Delhi and NCR and has worked with more than 3,800 adolescent girls and boys from 64 schools. Next, A.V. Venugopal from ITDP, Institute for Transport and Development Policy. Venugopal has been working with the city government in Chennai, providing technical assistance to various complete street projects through his role as a senior research associate with ITDP. He is currently working on expanding the street transformation across the city through the Chennai Mega Street Project. He's also actively involved in strategizing capacity development initiatives for city officials, engineers, and other stakeholders. He's an architect and has specialization on urban planning and policy design. Next is Nilanju Datta from Northeast Network. Nilanju has been working in the development sector and has been associated with organizations like Human Rights Law Network and Jagori. She is a lawyer by qualification and undertakes legal trainings for different stakeholders on various law related to women. She also has years of experience in providing psychosocial and legal counseling to survivors of violence. Currently, she is working with the Northeast Network, a women's rights organization based in Guwahati, Assam, as a project director. Her expertise lies in her ability to collectivize women youth and tracking the gaps and challenges faced by women youth in accessing their rights and entitlements. Shruti Batra Jaguri. Shruti Batra is the manager of resource and knowledge management. And can everybody hear me? Suddenly it says my internet connection is unstable. Can everybody hear
Yeah, we
me?
can hear you. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Suddenly said by, yeah. Shruti Batra is a manager of the resource and knowledge management team at Jagori. She is involved in community action research initiatives and in compilation of toolkits on the issues of women's safety, women's right, access to essential services for ending violence against women. She represents the organization in various networks and forums on gender and urban issues in the city. She has contributed to policy research and advocacy initiatives as a part of the CEDAW and SDG processes. She holds a bachelor's degree in economics and a master's degree in development studies. Shruti Patil, the Asia Foundation. Shruti Patil is a program officer at the Asia Foundation's country office in New Delhi. After joining the foundation as an associate program officer, she led a program to promote higher education opportunities for Afghan women in Indian universities. Currently, her role has expanded to include other programs on women's empowerment and urban governance. She also supports implementation of the foundation's flagship programs. Shruti holds a bachelor's and master's degree in political science. Shushma Mahabala, BPAC, Bangalore Political Action Committee. Shushma leads Be Safe, Safety of Women and Children initiative at BPAC, and works with a wide range of stakeholders and partners to make Bengaluru a safe and progressive city. There's our 7 speakers here. And I think I will now start with the question. Each of you will kind of get 5 minutes, at the most 7 minutes. If you can't finish in that, try and keep yourself in 5 minutes so that we can do another round of question and answers. Okay, I will introduce myself. I am Reepi Mandal. I've been working with Safe Tiffin for quite some time now. And I have been interested in the subject of gender and space since I was doing my master's in urban design. And since then, I've been working on this. Thank you, everyone. Let's start. So the question to you, to all the speakers, is that all of you, please briefly tell us about the work your organization does related to women's safety, access and participation in cities. If possible, please give us, please illustrate it with an example of good practice, policy, or intervention you were part of, which brought about some visible change in our cities. And in the context of COVID-19, as a young change maker, what do you think social distancing really means in our cities, in our public spaces, and if it impacts women differently? As we know that our cities are especially cities in India or in the global south, because of high density, the way cities have been kind of loosely organized and the challenges of settlements within the cities and things like that. So what does really social distancing mean in that context? Um, Akriti, will you kind of want to start?
Yeah, sure. I'll start. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, Riti. It's a very nice initiative, and I'm glad to be a part of this knowledge sharing. And as being part of a government organization, we basically work on infrastructure and urban design development in our areas, where like it includes everything like streets, neighborhood, green areas, parks, everything that comes under that area, so that ultimately the quality of life of the citizens can be improved. And along with that, we have also worked on a few community awareness programs and festivals. I would like to tell about one of the projects that was Karol Bagh decongestion project. And like several initiatives and subheads under these projects have directly or indirectly made the streets and areas safer. We pedestrianized Ajmal Khan Road last year in April end. Before the pedestrianization, hundreds of pedestrians used to walk only on 60% of the road width that was available. So like it was very like the pedestrian density was very high. And but like after pedestrianization, the 40% which was initially used by vehicles, that also pedestrians got. So like per pedestrian space was increased, so automatically the visibility of people on the road was increased. everything, and which led to better surveillance, whether people are walking or they are in the shops or they are sitting on the benches. Everybody can watch everybody. So like harassment reduced automatically. And then since the street was pedestrianized, so the street used to was has had started being active till late at night. And so we also observed that after like shops were getting closed, many females from around the neighborhood, they used to come and walk on the road at night in the market street. That was a very rare sight that we saw. And then this was about the pedestrian street. Apart from that, since we were working on the whole area of Karol Bagh zone, so on other streets that were vehicular streets, we worked on reducing on-street parking, and we worked on reclaiming the footpath space that was unhindered. We provided almost 2 meters of unhindered footpath space on all the streets. We worked on lighting. We worked on reducing the on-street parking. So visibility from shops as well as from the carriageway, both were increased. So automatically it makes the area safer. And then along with that, we also worked on several green spaces. Like in this area, there are around 8 neighborhood parks, and which were like it was pitch black dark at night. It used to be. So we worked on lighting on all these parks. We used to go there. We spotted all the dark spots in the area, and we made sure that it was lit at night, even at night. And then all these parks, they were surrounded by almost 2 meter high boundary walls, and which was like brick walls. So it's like whatever is happening inside, so you cannot see from outside. So in that neighborhood, it had become a spot for unusual activities. So we made sure, and it has already proposed, the proposal has gone that all these walls have to be permeable. Either remove the wall, or it has to be permeable, and you have to provide grills on that. And then the starting of Karol Bagh is at the Karol Bagh metro station. So when you get out of the metro station, suddenly like hundreds of rickshawalas will come and ask you, madam, please come, madam, please come. So it becomes very uncomfortable for a lady to stand there. So we made sure that we regulate this e-rickshaw movement. So we provided we provided a loop for the movement of rickshaws, and there was almost 10 meters of buffer between the loop and the entrance of the metro station. So like you can come out, you can breathe, and you can decide, or you can rush. It's on you. There's no pressure from any rickshawala or anywhere. And so this was the infrastructural change that we have been doing. And apart from that, we also worked on several awareness festivals and programs, which was to educate the community that how a public street should be used. So the first one was street art festival, in which we had involved almost 800 school kids to come and paint the street. So like it's a place where people can come and enjoy. So it's a celebration of life. So kids came, they enjoyed and all. Then the second one was step out at night, and this was basically to encourage every female in our city that you can use streets even at night, not only at day. And moreover, streets are a place where you are not supposed to come and only shop. You can come and do nothing. So it was a 2-night event where we had dance, music, entertainment, and also education for for all there were several self-help groups also which were involved. Safe Tiffin was also there. And then we had several female artisans who make stuff at their home, and they came and showcased their work. There were several performers who performed in male dominant roles. I had never seen a female Qawwali singer, but it was there in that. Then moreover, there were many leaders from different backgrounds, legal advisors were there who came on, and they showcased how things are supposed to be done. Then there were several talks on domestic violence and different kind of harassment, and if you find yourself amongst that, then how you should react, where you should go and talk, where you should go and find help. And since it was a street festival, so what it was my observation that it reached to people who were never actually involved in these kind of dialogues. Like we are having a seminar here, but the women of a poor community, they will never participate in the seminar. So there, all those kinds of people used to come and had come and got involved in those dialogues. Moreover, there are several males also who got involved. So it's very important to educate male members also. And moreover, since it was a community like public open festival, so we also got several like many feedback from females of the society that we want this and we want those things. So we are going to incorporate those things in our thing, in our further interpretations. And in this COVID-19, it has like the what initially was our outdoors has become our indoors right now. So all the challenges that we were facing in outdoors, we are facing that in indoor right now. Like initially, only like we used to consider that public spaces are not safe if they are deserted. But right now, insides are also not safe. So like it's better to be inside. Better, it's like we have to be socially distant, but we don't have to be mentally distant. We have to be very vigilant about what's happening around. Like you have to know, like you have to be very uh, like you have to be very aware of if anybody is getting harassed in your neighborhood or the house near you. So like in that way because not everybody can get help right now, but if you hear or if you see something, then you have to be like that. And yeah, of course, like the, in the social distancing times, our streets have become more deserted and all. So of course it's a point to be noted. And then more like there are many more things that I have noticed that since in these times we are not able to get help very frequently, so in other like in several other ways it is affecting. Like if people are not able to pay rents, then they are asked for like then they are being harassed and all. And if they're not, if you are not able, like for example, I live alone, but like every time somebody knocks at the door, I'm like, who's there? I have not called anybody. So like these are challenges that every female is facing right now. So yeah,
Thank
that's
you. Thank you very much, Akriti. Anupama, would you like to continue?
Yes, thank you, Akriti. Hi everyone, I'm Anupama. I come from a conservative Bihari family, and I have grown up in Delhi NCR. So being alert has always been a necessity, which became a habit later. It has been a constant thread. Safety has been a constant thread while I was growing up, be it while going to school, traveling to college, or while I travel in a metro, or even when I receive a pepper spray as a birthday gift. So it's been there. Coming to the Gender Lab for the fellowship in Mumbai changed a lot of things for me. I think I experienced freedom in my own existence. I tried to build an identity for myself, and I also became more aware about the patriarchal society that we are all part of, and how it was not my responsibility to be ready with a weapon like pepper spray to feel safe. Safety is not a privilege to have or to have to ask for. It is my right to feel safe wherever I am. Um, as a fellow with the Gender Lab, I mentored 600 girls to go out in public spaces and speak against issues that bothered them. For example, one of my groups wanted to understand about sexual harassment, and wanted to demand for a safe public space in Malvani in Malad. So we went to the local police station and collected the information, which my girls used to conduct a workshop with the other girls in their school. Um, so as my girls were breaking their barriers, so was I learning to push myself and dream. I felt the need of bringing the program to Delhi, to my home city, because I realized that the topic of the project didn't matter. What mattered was a group of 6 to 7 girls working together, stepping out in public, and demanding change. For example, in a school in East Delhi, a group of girls decided to work against the taboos about menstruation. they first of all started educating girls from 6 to 8 standard in their school, and when they got comfortable with the idea, they went out and educated and conducted a workshop with 40 women in their community in a public park, which was a common space for their locality. What is happening here is that our girls are becoming confident and courageous to claim their space, and which enables them to becoming an active citizens. In the same year as the Delhi chapter started, we collaborated with the Asia Foundation to initiate our work, our program with adolescent boys, where we wanted to talk about masculinity, and our approach to go about it is that we create a safe space for boys, first of all, to be able to acknowledge the challenges that they face because of patriarchy, and get them to reflect upon their own behaviors so that they can start becoming ambassadors of change in their lives first. Through the whole program, one of my biggest learning has been that when given a creative, safe space, all our violent behaviors come to rest. I feel hopeful when a boy feels comfortable acknowledging in front of his class that I have to go to the washroom when I want to cry because I'm afraid of being bullied by my own classmates. I get goosebumps when one of my boys shares in the class that my learning has been to be myself, and that I don't have to pretend to be tough and angry all the time just to be a man. We also realize that the Gender Lab's work is focused around behavioral change, and to support that, we engage with the parents and teachers of our children too, because they have a huge role in deciding and in deciding the behaviors of a child. In the past years, we have been able to impact lives of over 30,000 adolescent girls and 5,000 adolescent boys, and we have had 29 fellows who come from different geographies, castes, classes, and belief systems of India. With our work on the ground, on the root of the problem of patriarchy, we have been able to understand that as the inner change is very much important to derive a social change. That's what our work focuses on. And to answer your second question around COVID-19, how it's been, I think there is no one experience that can be just taken as a narrative. I think there are many different experiences of women across different demographics, because social distancing in India means many different things in a wide diversity India is like. For example, for some women it hasn't changed anything because it's with respect to mobility and sense of freedom. For many it has become for many have become burdened with the unpaid care work that they were doing already, but now it's doubled and multiplied. For many of the women, the home is not a safe space to be in, and we're getting to know all these things through our fellows in different communities. There is one community where restrictions of social distancing are not being followed, which means men gather in the streets and make it unsafe for women to go out whenever needed and access different things. For example, markets, for example, health facilities, and everything. And from our schools and students, what we're learning is that a lot of migration is going to rise because a lot of families are going to move towards their home villages, and they will be and there is more likely a chance of less number of girls to come back to school. So as young change makers, it's our time to show our leadership differently and show up for the cause, because there are many more reasons now to ask a girl and a woman to come back home and stay at home. And It's our time to hold our decision makers more accountable and reimagine a world where we can access safe spaces and facilities for our safety. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Anupama. And I would request Venu Gopal to go next. And
sure. Thank you so much, Vritti, for the warm introduction and the start. And it was great to hear Akriti and Anupama share the commendable work that they've been doing through the organizations, and looking forward to hear from the rest of you as well. So I'll just start by giving a quick glimpse of what ITDP does and what we've done in this field. So ITDP is a global non-profit organization. We work across the world supporting cities. And in India, we've been working for over 20 years, supporting at the national, state, and city level. And we basically provide technical assistance on sustainable mobility, sustainable transportation projects. So on this front, through technical reports, through policy formulations, through a lot of capacity development, and research to back the work that we do on the ground, we support the cities in this work. So I've been working closely, as Ruti touched upon in the introduction, with the Chennai Corporation and other stakeholders in Chennai to ensure that the street spaces are much more safer for the pedestrians, cyclists, and the different vulnerable users as a whole. And if I were to add to the conversation on women's safety and mobility in particular, it's the need to address and to develop solutions on this front is relatively a new conversation in most Indian cities. Today, unlike any time before, women are encouraged to go out of their homes for jobs to probably somewhere else, where earlier they were constricted to their homes itself. However, there is a lot of pushback that they still face, a lot of fear because of lack of safe access to these opportunities. So there are studies which show how women have refused to take up very good job opportunities because they do not have good means of accessing them, because probably it was farther, there was no safe access. And they were probably forced to not look at an opportunity or to look at a less good option at a place which was closer to them. So on one side, when cities provide for education, healthcare, and job opportunities for women, which are great steps done by many cities in the right direction, it is also very critical to ensure that the access for women to these opportunities and between them are safe. So we all relate to this thought. I think one of the panelists in the last webinar rightly said that sexual harassment and women's safety has been a pandemic that has been there since forever. And if you look at how women commute in Indian cities in this conversation, we see that while men walk, cycle, and use public transportation, roughly 50% of the population, over 80% of the population of women commute to their opportunities by walk, cycle, or public transportation. This is closely linked to conversations regarding affordability as well. Their travel patterns are very different compared to men. And hence, it is extremely critical that these modes of transportation that I mentioned, walking, cycling, and public transportation, are made safer for them. Because if it is not safe, what is seen is these women stop going to these opportunities because they don't have an alternative. The alternative is probably to switch to a private motor vehicle, assuming that's a safer option, but majority of them don't have the option to switch to that itself from the affordability point of view. So this is where we come in as ITDP through the work that we do in cities over the last 20 plus years. So we have been supporting these cities in the reforms in ensuring walking, cycling, and transportation changes are institutionalized. You have them done through good designers and informed through participatory planning tools. So in the interest of time, I'll just quickly touch upon two brief examples before my thoughts on the COVID response. So one was in the launch of the Pedestrian Plaza project in T Nagar in Chennai, which some of you might know of. It's very similar to the Karol Bagh project, which Akriti touched upon earlier, where it's a 1.4 kilometer stretch of street, which used to, be a space which had a close meaning to everyone's heart because of the shopping nature and historical nature. But over time, vehicles had taken over the place. There were a lot of accidents, pollution, noise, and the walking edges were restricted to less than a meter wide, a lot of parking everywhere and pollution. So we were able to reclaim a lot of space, and today it stands as a symbol for many cities in India itself, with around 7 to 10 meters wide footpaths on both sides, through good design, through elements like parking management, bike share systems, through elements to increase livability, placemaking, we were able to relook at how the street could be. So this was launched in 2019 and it has received a lot of good feedback from the users. And similar to the one in Karol Bagh, we were happy to hear how elderly people, caregivers, women and children were giving good responses. For instance, there were individuals who said that they were happy to let go of their child to play in that area because they felt it was much more safer because they don't see a vehicle, coming onto them. There were instances where women said how they felt comfortable to spend more time in the evening hours, to spend more time with their family and see street as a different space itself. So these stories sort of pushed the city to scale up this project. And this is the Mega Streets project, which we are right now working with the city to look at 6 different neighborhoods where we are working with different designers. Quickly touching upon another example is that of a small tactical intervention that we did in Mylapore, which is a short-term design intervention. It's a short stretch of street, which was accessed by school students from about 5 to 6 schools in the neighborhood, as well as residents. The concerns, in short, were a lot of antisocial activities, eve-teasing, chain snatching, and we had stories where the teacher used to tell how they were afraid to send their students once they saw the sun was setting a little early. So they had to make it a point that the students left in groups and not alone. So that is a kind of fear that is there. So collaboratively working with the traffic police and the residents group, we were able to sort of clean up the place, in short, basically remove abandoned areas, dead spots, through paint and other measures, relooked at how the space can be. So this is the impact of how street design can improve safety for all users and women in particular. Just to add a few points to the COVID response from the mobility perspective, because Akriti and Anupama have touched about the issues of how women abuse at homes have increased right now. So from the mobility perspective, I would say that yes, it is a threat because always transport planners have looked at this field as something which is gender neutral, thinking that mobility patterns of men and women are same, which is not the case. So going forward, there is fear of people in using mass transit options like buses because it's crowded. So the cities right now are strategizing on how these systems can be. And since, like I mentioned earlier, women already have faced difficulties of this being a constraint to access their opportunities, going forward, this will further be a challenge. But at the same time, this is a very good opportunity for a city to ensure that there is gender representation in their decision making right now and planning. So we are already supporting a few public agencies in Chennai and going forward in other cities in India as well on how they can think their transit solutions will be. So this is one angle where we are trying to support them to ensure that these solutions are gender responsive as well. So I think we can discuss more on this going forward in the webinar. Back to you, Ritu.
Thank you so much, Venugopal. Thank you so much. That was like really great to understand that how you have contributed in Chennai. I will request Nilanju Datta to continue now.
Hi everyone. Thank you so much, Viti, Shreya, and the CityPaint team for inviting me to be part of this webinar. To introduce a little bit about Northeast Network, ours is a 25-year-old organization based in Guwahati. We have offices in Meghalaya and Nagaland as well. And our organization began as a part of the Beijing mobilization process for the Beijing World Conference that happened in '95. And Northeast Network is one of the first organization, women's rights organization in the region to address critical gender issues and combining activism with advocacy and addressing critical gender issues through dialogue and dissemination of knowledge. Now, coming to our work on the issue of women's safety, again, I would like to emphasize that Northeast Network has been one of the first organizations to look at the concept of women's safety, not only from the perspective of violence or sexual harassment, because when we say women's safety or safety of women in public space, generally the understanding is sexual harassment being faced by women in public spaces. But we also try to bring in the concept of safe mobility. And when we say safe mobility, we are also that looking into the aspect of absence of reliable public transport or lack of enabling infrastructure or other behavioral issues that are related to the issue of safety. So NEN had actually collaborated with CEPT University a few years back and had conducted a study to look at these aspects. And what we had found out was that that sexual harassment also emanated from the lack of safe infrastructure, such as the footpaths, well-lit footpaths, street lights, lack of public security presence, etc. Sadly and unfortunately, we haven't been able to push this agenda with our government here in Assam because of the lack of political will, I would say. And also, although we did get positive response from the Assam Police, the Commissioner of Police at the time was very happy with the data that we had collected through our safety audits that we had done in collaboration with the safety field, and he had assured us that he would be using this data to to kind of develop their services and make their services more accessible to women. But like all bureaucracy, we were again, we got tangled up in the bureaucratic hurdles, and the Commissioner of Police was then transferred to another department. He was transferred, and the new Commissioner of Police came in, but we had to again start from the scratch. So these are some of the challenges that Northeast Network has been constantly facing while trying to also at the same time pursue our work on women's safety. Because we were not being able to break through with the government, what now we have done is that in the select districts of Assam where we are working, we have collectivized young boys and girls and youth groups to talk about the issue of women's safety, to look at the concept of women's safety from a rights perspective, to create a space for young boys and girls to talk about issues of masculinity, behavioral issues, why one would behave the way they behave, and how it kind of affects the lives of young girls and women. And these are some of the some of the initiatives that Northeast Network have taken so far. As far as the response to COVID question is concerned, definitely social distancing has had a great impact on women and children, we have seen. And the panelist before me has already said that we all know that domestic violence has been a global concern as of now. Our concern is also the post-lockdown. Once the lockdown is being lifted up, we are yet to see the kind of effect that it could have on women. Women accessing public transport, women going out to their work, especially domestic workers, street vendors, women street vendors would be accessing these public spaces for their livelihood. How it is going to have an impact, and I think we can all, I can for sure say that the impact will not be positive. It will be negative. So we are yet to see. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nilanju. And you're like right on time. So thank you so much. I would request Shruti Batra to go next. Shruti, is your internet stable now? Can you speak?
Yes, it's better now.
It's better.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I think we talk since you're here now.
Yeah, thank you so much, Shruti, for inviting me. So Jaguri, I'll speak a bit about Jaguri first. So Jaguri was established in 1984, and our Safe Cities work was initiated in 2004, which approached women's safety from a perspective of women's right to city and access to public spaces. And Jaguri has developed a safety strategy, basically focusing on knowledge building, gender inclusive infrastructure, community initiatives, and access to services and justice. And this model has been geographically and sectorally popularized, and many sister organizations, partner organizations have been able to use the tools that we have developed in collaboration with different other organizations and partners, including Safety Pin. And to share these learnings across different cities, we have recently established a feminist network of cities with partnership from 21 organizations in 10 cities. And the women's safety audit tool that was developed in Canada, we have also frequently used it. There have been capacity building sessions across communities where we are working, and community women and youth have used that tool not just for research and advocacy, but also for their own empowerment, to negotiate public spaces, to take ownership of decision making process. And if I have to talk about one good practice, so I'll talk about an intervention that was held maybe 9-10 years back, but I think it continues to remain relevant till now, because investment in young leadership at that particular time is really sustained till now. The local leaders that were developed as a part of that intervention Hello? Hello?
We can hear you. We can hear you.
Hello?
Yes, Shruti, we can hear you.
You can hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Actually, I think the connection got lost.
Yes.
Yeah. The connection got lost. So that intervention.
If you want,
I
you can
can't
start your video. That will make at least.
Yeah, maybe I'll do that. Yeah. Yeah. So, as a part of this project, which was done in collaboration with UN Habitat, there were a range of actions which were implemented, including mapping infrastructure through safety audits, peer-to-peer learning processes, perspective and capacity building, and ensuring that their voice really reaches the policy makers and decision makers. And possible changes which were included, that they were able to reclaim a neighborhood park which used to be a male-dominated space. And this process resulted in a core group of 100 young women and men change makers who challenged social norms, who were able to initiate community campaigns. And if we see them now also, they are very active. A few of them also were a part of the recent collaboration between King's College London, Jagori and Safety Pin in gendering the Smart Cities project, where they, through their creative expressions, WhatsApp diaries, rap songs, Wikipedia page, they were really able to speak back to the concept of smart city from an urban periphery in Delhi. And I think this model is easily replicated, so it's a good practice. And in terms of women, impact of social distancing on women and girls, I think all the panelists have already shared about the increasing burden of unpaid care work, violence which is increasing. So Jagori runs helplines which are active during lockdown also. And though we have observed a 50% decline in the calls, but we are aware, we have access to NCW data also, which has stated that the violence is increasing across India. And there can be various reasons. Women are stuck with abusers at their own home. There is lack of private space, so they are not able to really call. But sometimes they are sending WhatsApp messages. They are, sharing their concerns through emails. So we can say that violence against women and girls have been increased. And so because we also work in communities, so we have heard experiences of how social distancing has really affected the lives, personal and professional lives of women in formal sector workers. And yesterday only we had a webinar on rights and protection of women domestic workers. So we heard experiences from across India about loss of income, salary cuts, no cash in hand. Also, like in India, the concept of purity and pollution and other disparities has increased due to social distancing. So we are just now envisaging, I was having a chat with some youth group members in the community. So they were really sharing that, a new normal will be created now. Women really, you don't know, it has been a hard hit victory from women to come from their private homes and be able to reclaim the public spaces. But, there is threat, there is fear now that, we don't know what will be the new definition and imagination of public spaces and women's access to it. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Shruti. We will move to the next Shruti we have with us, Shruti Patil. Shruti Patil, would you like to go ahead now?
Thanks, Shruti. I'm the other Shruti, as often happened in my class. So many Shrutis in the world. I work with the Asia Foundation's India office in New Delhi. Just very quickly about Asia Foundation or TAF. We're a non-profit international development organization, and we have presence in 17 Asian countries. We work under 5 overarching goals: strengthen governance, empower women, expand economic opportunity, increase environmental resilience, and promote regional cooperation. Um, we work with a gender equality and social inclusion lens, especially in areas which are traditionally either gender neutral or gender blind. And for me, what makes my work exciting is that my personal, lived experience and everyday problems finds a space on the table for discussion, and we're able to take a step back and deliberate and work with some of our partners on, solving some of these big issues. I work under the Women's Empowerment Portfolio, and I'd like to quickly touch upon 3 verticals that we work on that respond to this question to us. So the foundation focuses on working in urban India and largely on tier 2 and tier 3 cities. The first program that I want to talk about is our vertical on improving women's urban place safety. So the primary focus or the underlying question here is, how do we make our cities more gender friendly? What are the ways that we can make cities accessible to women 24/7? And for us, the 2 critical areas here are transport and mobility and public infrastructure. And the 4 strategies we're looking at is data-driven governance solution, gender-sensitive policing, behavior change initiatives, and building strategic partnerships with key stakeholders. And a great example of this is the program that we did with our long-term partner, Safety Pin and CSR, which is the KOICA supported Making Cities Safe for Women in India, where we were able to highlight some critical concerns around women's safety in 3 very new cities for us, which is Bhopal, Gwalior, and Jodhpur. And with Safety Pin, which Rithi has given us such a great overview, we were able to present some crowdsourced data to inform policy making in the cities. We were also able to support Safety Pin to take up discussion with transport service providers and women users to understand mobility in these 3 cities. And if you've gone to any of these 3 cities, you know that public transport is very new here, and formal public transport is very little or completely absent. So it's an interesting inroad. And the second important part of this program was to work with frontline law enforcement officers. So for this, we partnered with the Center for Social Research and delivered a gender-sensitive policing training, which was later mainstreamed into the Academy's existing program. The idea here is that even if everything is fixed, what happens if a woman experiences violence in an urban space? The first responder is always going to be a police person, and that person's response kind of dictates what happens next. So the idea was to work with them. And an interesting part of this program, which we all enjoyed, was the dissemination strategy. And we had, we built a social media strategy with our colleagues in Safety Pin and CSR, and we got the hashtag to trend a couple of times, which was quickly screenshotted for posterity, so everybody knows we got that. The second part of the puzzle is what Anupama spoke about, which is engaging with men and boys. The foundation is very committed to engaging with men and boys, and to allow them to explore their own lived experiences of masculinity and unpack some of what goes behind, the understanding of power and equity. And we work with Blue Ribbon Movement, like Anupama said, with 48 schools in Mumbai, Delhi, and Indore. We've also worked with YP Foundations, Mardwari Baat and Kadam Badhate Chalo of Priya, which you might have heard of. And the last vertical that I think I'd like to talk about is women's access to economic empowerment, specifically through virtual and digital opportunities. There's a lot of conversation going on about the future of work and how platform-based gig economy is here to stay. And at this moment of arrival for the gig economy, what is important for us to look at is some of the vulnerabilities and barriers to women's access in this space. Things like access to resources, fair work, mobility, and what are some of the policies that the platform economies themselves have for women. So then moving on very quickly to the COVID-19 context, we're definitely seeing an unequal impact on women, like most of my fellow panelists have said. And even within the foundation, we're hearing about increased cases of domestic violence across Asian countries. And in India, we've in fact seen, 100% increase very soon after the lockdown was declared. So what does this mean for women's safety? And we've all established that for women, access to public spaces is a negotiated reality, which came out so beautifully in the previous webinar, where we were looking back that this is a negotiated reality for all of us. So what happens next? Will women have to bear an unfair burden of COVID? If yes, and how? Because there are a lot of them are engaged in insecure labor. Other questions are, will girl children be made to drop out more? And what happens, which Venugopal really put it better than I can, about public transport and when it will go back to what it was, because so many of us rely on it for our economic life, and women more so. What are some of the mental health concerns that we are going to have to address on priority? So what is very interesting for me and for our discussions within our team is, how can we adapt some of our ongoing and future programming to take into account some of these vulnerabilities and to continue to support the communities? And the last bit here is that, and it's a blatant plug to the name of the webinar, is that how do we think of affecting change in a new way without having to reinventing the wheels? So, how are we looking back while we're looking forward? Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you, really. Thank you so much, Shruti. I think let's move on to our last speaker, Sushma. You have been waiting for a long time now and patiently hearing all of us. So Sushma, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Listening to all the speakers, I totally forgot that even I am here to speak. It's been wonderful listening to all of you here. I lead the safety initiative at BPAC. BPAC is a 7-year-old organization, and since the last 5 years, I've been leading the safety initiative there. We work in the places of safety in public places, workplaces, schools, colleges, and communities. BPAC has a very interesting program called BClip, where we pick aspiring political leaders who want to contest in local elections and who want to contribute back to the city in terms, into their own local community, apply to this program. We train them over a period of 3 months, and after that, they become change makers of their own community. We have a network of 200 such leaders who wear party hats and who are non-partisan as well. But when they work with us, they become non-partisan. They don't do it under the party hat. So with these leaders, I lead a lot of, help them to curate certain things, make them do large awareness programs at the schools, colleges, and communities in their ward level. This has been very effective for us to disseminate important information from the city police and various other departments, and also initiate important conversations at the community level about being active bystanders and using resources like Namma 100 that we have in the city. And another important initiative that I have led over the last 3 years is Bangalore City Transport Corporation, the bus corporation BMTC, received the Nirbhaya funds, the 52 crores, out of which around 8 initiatives, 6 of them have been infrastructure and technology related, 2 of them has been around behavioral change. Across this 8, right from the beginning of collecting data, Safety Pin has been one of our big partner in that, talking to the transport corporation, what are the things that we need to be doing, then actually throughout the various phases, engaging with the city citizens to know are we in the right track, has been quite interesting experience. Out of these 8 different things, we now have the waiting groups at the major bus stations, which women can access, which has been a big change, visible change. Second thing for me, the biggest large fun that I had in the whole thing was the gender sensitization initiative that we did for the drivers and conductors. And we have around 20,000 plus staff, out of which for the phase 1 we have already completed for the 11,000, because this was something new for the first time that we were doing. And the first 5,000 is something that I conducted the session, and out of which the first 2,000 were the new recruits who had just joined the Transport Corporation, men in early 20s who had come from rural background. They had just been in the city for the 2 to 3 days, been to the streets. So I was the first woman they met after their seeing the streets. So we used to have this 3-hour long workshop with candid chat. And then that's where we could see the difference between hostility and how they actually perceive. And we also did see that just because men who come from younger audience doesn't mean that they're more okay with women being, they're still hostile. We need to have conversation. And especially in Bangalore, it's a big challenge because we have there's a big cultural differences. Our drivers come from rural background, and we have women not just from Bangalore, from other parts of the country. There is a big language barrier, cultural difference, and the cultural shock. And we need to have this conversation with them and also make them understand that how they can use the infrastructure and technology that the government is putting in, because end of the day, they are the ones who can actually drive change. They are the ones who actually make this infrastructure and technology in place. So that has been quite wonderful. And also other thing that we have been doing here to actually make everybody acknowledge that public places are also workplaces for significant number of women. So even at PMTC, making work that buses the workplace of the women conductors. So we had that conversation with their male colleagues as well. And we have taken this conversation with the hospital associations and also make Sexual Harassment at Workplace Act being implemented in BMTC. All the depots have internal complaints committees, hospitals, associations that we have worked with, and also extended the same work with the colleges. This has been in brief about the work. Other work, because I work in the space of advocacy and hyperlocal advocacy, and whenever I've had these conversations with the resident welfare associations during the elections, talking to them, what is that we need to demand, even when I've led conversations about safety, about women's needs, I was quite disappointed because it was usually the men in their middle-aged men or senior citizens who would come and actually talk about what women's needs are. And advocacy space, when in your resident welfare association meetings, ward committee meetings, and all of that are pretty much led by men. And like men, for reasons they don't want the parks to be open in the middle of the day, but that is when the women can use. And even when women speak, these are the women of upper caste and upper class women who get to speak. And that has been one of the biggest challenge, right? How do we ensure in our cities all women get equal space to voice out? So that is one area where we're currently working with the women self-help group leaders at a constituency level. We're trying to build the capacity of them, working with them to use tools like Safety Pin, and so that they become the voice of that community. And this is in brief about the work. Now talking about COVID, I see three different things here. One is with respect to how do we access streets? How have streets changed? The second thing is with respect to our homes, and the third thing is with respect to employment. One of my friend who went to street to buy something as a grocery, there were just two other men in the street, and she was the only one, and she was harassed in the street. That just because there are lesser people, we are at more risk, and the character of the street hasn't changed. And second thing, because I work with large group of college communities and students and women, I have also received few calls from the victims at odd hours of the night, at middle of the night or early in the morning, times when they could actually access phones to make a call to tell what has been happening. This is what I could learn is because the men and also in some cases women, older women in the house do know that there is no way that the victims can get help. So their response has been, who will you call now? Nobody will extend help. So that has also been, now the confidence that women had, I have help. Now we have to rebuild that confidence post COVID. And the third thing is with respect to employment, the burden of women who has increased, and it's a whole different challenge that we have to restart the conversation and understand. But between all of those things, what I'm really positive about is, as I work in Bangalore, the last time we had an issue like this was in 1900s when we had plague. And when we go back to see what was the plague effect in Bangalore city, we know that new planned areas were built, new temples were built because people felt like they have to pray more to God and all of that. But there has been no recorded stories, data, or anything about what women's experience or the experience of marginalized communities was then. That was not even considered, right? But today, fortunately, because of the last 3-4 decades of work that a lot of women have done, a lot of organizations have done, we are in a place where we are not denying, we are acknowledging that there's a problem, we are collecting data, and we are talking about it. So I think that still gives me hope. And so that I know once there's a lot of work that's already happening, but I think we'll appreciate this a lot more. And once the lockdown is down, all of our efforts will be 10x or 100x more in that effort.
Thank you so much, Sushma. I mean, that's really great to leave it with a positive note that all this responses we are getting now, all this analysis which is happening, all this research which is going on is probably going to help us make a better tomorrow. And so I will sum up all of this at the end, because we already have some questions which were sent to us before we started, because we had already shared our content with them, that what you're going to discuss and all of that. So a few questions came up. So there are 5 questions. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say one, I'm going to call out one question, and then whoever wants to kind of respond to that will can. So raise your hand or whatever and kind of do that. So I'll just read out once. So what are the different policies in India for ensuring women's safety in public space? Would anybody want to respond to that?
Should we answer this right now?
Yeah,
or do you want to go with all the questions?
Right now, yeah, this is part of the question.
Not with respect to policy, but we do have acts in place. In Bangalore, especially, I'm sorry, in Karnataka, we have something called Good Samaritan law. So even if you see somebody facing sexual harassment or something that's happening in the street, quite often is, oh, should I call the police? And I don't want to tell my name. I don't want to get involved in the whole thing. But at least in Bangalore, what we're trying to tell people is, you can just call 100, tell this is happening. Don't even tell your name, just copy call. And even if you tell your call, you don't have to be involved in the whole thing. And of course, any person who is going through harassment or whatever can walk into a police station and tell this is exactly what has been happening. I think at least talking about Bangalore, we have resources in place, and every police station should have a women's desk. You can access the police and file a complaint saying this is the person and this is the where it has been happening. And it can be walking into a police station, calling the helpline number, or even when you call the helpline number, you can get an appointment to meet the police so that you don't have to go and wait for the police there.
Okay. Great. Anybody else wants to add?
I can add to it from the mobility perspective, though it might not explicitly state women's safety as a larger policy. Like I responded to one question on similar lines about policy change. In Chennai, the NMT policy, non-motorized transport policy, came into adoption in 2014. It was the first city, and other cities are right now preparing policies as well. So it allocates 60% of the transport budget for NMT-related works, which, as we know, it ensures better street design, and it does explicitly state the need to address the needs of women and have participatory planning approaches through conversations with different stakeholders for the same. So it partly addresses the need, and it has nudged the city to look at this approach going forward, and it has been implemented in some works.
Okay, I'm going to move on to the next question now.
I would like to add some more.
Yeah.
We have worked on few changes in the parking policy, which actually like through how much on-street parking should be there and how much should not be there, and so that the reclamation of footpath space is easier, and street space is used by users and not by cars. And the second changes that we have we are working on and has been implemented also a bit is is in the TOD policy, where we have included the point of active frontage in the buildings, and there should be no setback and no boundary wall, so that the visibility and surveillance on the streets are better.
Okay. So let's take the next question. Why is it that even after having all the power and autonomy through the post a woman holds, still she faces all kinds of biases, irrespective of the field she is in? we can all answer that, right? But yes.
Can I share?
Yes.
Yeah. I think the biases that we as women face come from our deep-rooted patriarchal minds, and the fact that there's always an assumption. For example, there's always an assumption and about the expectations that you will have from a woman. So whenever it's about anything that you want to talk to a woman, you will not be critical. They do not receive a critical feedback. Rather, the things go to the personal attack or the assumptions that are made about a woman, even if they are in power, be it political, be it in financial power, or be it in corporate sector also. We get to see this in media and in politics a lot, and I think it has a lot to do with what we think about a woman and how we assume and how we feel. For example, we have always heard of a term called a working mother. We never say a working father, right? So whenever there's always a certain expectation that once you fulfill these, then only you get to work and show up outside in the public space. And whenever you are taking a decision, you are still answerable to somebody else. I think that's what it is. Yeah.
So we'll go on to the next one because we're really falling short of time here. So I would certainly like to know more about women's safety during these trying times. What are the various ways to report a case of domestic violence during lockdown? And that will be regarded as a priority issue amid such times when the police is on duty on COVID-19 throughout the day. So anybody would like to
Can I respond to that?
Sure. Yes.
See, there the National Women's Helpline 181 is functional, and at least for the state of Assam, we know for sure that they have been receiving cases, and the one-stop centers in the districts are functional, and they have been receiving cases, complaints from women who are facing domestic violence, and they have been providing counseling over phone, and they have been also referring the cases to the police, because we all know at this trying times the police are also being involved and are given additional duties. So through what we Northeast Network, what we have tried to do here in the state of Assam is we are linking it up with the 181. We are linking up with our Gramin Mahila Kendras that are situated in the villages that we work in. The helpline numbers are functional, and also the only problem that the one challenge is that when a woman would like to seek shelter is where we are facing problem, because the shelter homes would then ask us to take the woman to the hospital to get her COVID-19 test done. So that is one problem, but otherwise the helpline numbers and the police are pretty supportive.
So there are two questions which came up in our question and answer box, one is by Saloni Atal. Who are the most important stakeholders in terms of driving change at a city level? Would anyone on the panel speak about this question? Thank you. Yeah. And there is another one, I'll just say, if anyone of you would like to pick that. What policies do you think we can try to bring about in respective states to increase women's safety in mobility?
Yeah. When you talk about the most important stakeholders in terms of driving a change at the city level, I think the users are the most important, be it of any sector, whether they are vendors or the shoppers or the people who are living there or the people who are coming from outside. If you cater to the needs of them, then I think the change will work on pretty well. And if it's acceptable by them, then.
I'd like to add a different perspective to that. Yes, the users are the most important. But over the course of trying to get a city to think differently and to make them understand, like some of you pointed out that even when my colleagues like Ashruti and Shreya Angadapalli, they enter a meeting which is largely dominated by men, it stands out how the decision making itself is. So it is great when we have decision makers who are inspired. So I would say that it is equally important to have decision makers at be city administrators or engineers who understand the issue itself. So once we have such people on the team, it is very easier and much more stronger the impact that you can create, and you're able to scale this up across the city as well. So yes, certainly understanding the users and catering to their needs is important, but at the same time, having a strong voice for the work can push the work that the city does.
There is one last
Add to that?
Yeah.
Sorry, can I just add quickly to the discussion on the stakeholders? So just listening to a lot of experts who work in this area, I think what always is stuck to me is that the idea of following where the money is going. So depending on who is holding the purse to the issue you're trying to, you want to find out who that stakeholder is, who's going to disperse the money, right? So I think that's an interesting way to look at what's at identifying the stakeholder that can help you.
Yeah, great. There is one last one, which, yeah, thank you, Shruti. And that's an important point to look from another perspective, to look at that the money is important and how it can kind of contribute to bring about this change. And so the last one, which is there, is what policies do you think we can try to bring about respective states to increase women's safety in mobility? So the people who have worked in transport, would you like to kind of contribute? Maybe Venu?
I'll start. One thing with respect to working, especially in public places and public transport, is something that I want in Bangalore City is passenger information system in every bus stop. As a bus user, say, just to give you that example, just knowing what time a bus is going to come is going to help me decide whether I need to get into an auto or wait, right? So if I have to put passenger information system in the buses, the bus stops is not owned by the transport corporation, it's owned by the municipal corporation. So for them, it's not a priority. For the transport corporation, it's a priority. Then there is problem of revenue sharing, how and all of that. And it's also because certain times when you're trying to do that, we have to build a whole bus queue, shelter or anything. The traffic police also come into picture because they are the ones also another decision maker. So we have so many 2-3 different guys getting, and that is where our work comes in to get all of these 3 different guys together to decide. And also every time there's a new infrastructure, say like with respect to like a market that is being built or anything, to date we aren't seeing because it's the men who design how all of this should be, and they still use the same designs of, that was done like 3-4 decades ago. To date, some markets that is built do not consider that there are street vendors of women, there has to be separate waiting room for women, and all of those infrastructure needs as well. So I think if I had a wish list, the first thing I would do is have a decision maker instead of it being divided into different people who tell us this is what we should be doing, and understand that these different agencies are service providers and not exactly decision makers, right? That is like, when we talk of something called municipal planning committee and things like that in the city, which is not functional, and that is what we need. And second is at a policy level in infrastructure, I'm seeing with respect to transport department, it has changed quite a bit, because now they understand anything that they do, a gender perspective should be brought in terms of policy and report and all of that. But that still hasn't extended to a lot of other places, like, that is built into public places, say a primary healthcare center, which is also a public place, or something like a Anganwadi or a school, because that is also still women go to get their basic services from the government, or even the government offices or the RTO. Even there, it's still designed in such a way that they assume it's the user, and when they say it's the user, it's the men that they visualize everything around. So we need to bring in gender perspective with respect to every single thing that the government does.
Can I add to it, or are we short of time?
Sure.
Just thanks, Sushma. I think you've covered the most important points, I would say. Just to add the importance of capacity development as well, that there is a need for gender sensitization of the officials of the transport department itself. And I think that itself helps in keeping the system going and looking into new perspectives. As we know that the Nirbhaya funding is something which the states have received, but in, I think, almost all the states, it's not utilized well. It's underutilized in Tamil Nadu itself, from what I know. So capacity development, even on such fronts, on how these budgets can be put into good use, is something that we are supporting the city in, and many of you will be supporting the city, other cities as well. So that shows how the stakeholders require support at different stages. So one is having gender representation itself in the decision making, like Sushma suggested. So I think that's a possible way of looking at it.
I want to add one thing.
Okay.
Priti? Yeah.
Yes.
So sorry, the connection is a bit difficult today. Yeah, in terms of policies, I think we have already established that these public spaces are also workspaces for some women. So we also need to see, maybe like the pending National Domestic Workers Policy, it's still a draft. So we also need to think which are the policies which are pending and can, which are most urgent in this regard. And also maybe different kind of guidelines for women street vendors, home-based workers, because a new normal will really create a different picture for them. Yeah, thank you.
There's one interesting question which came up, and I think that's the last one we are going to take. Does anyone else?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that like footpath is also a mode of mobility. So and the present lighting that standard that we have in our policies is very less in comparison to what we should have. So change in that, and then cycling, because in village areas many women tend to cycle, but in urban areas we don't cycle because we don't feel safe. So making that a part of a mobility policy, because we don't have safer mobility in that.
Yeah. So I'm going to take this last question, and quickly, we just have 5-7 minutes left. Okay. So quickly, with regards to the informal settlement in India, what would you say the main impacts had been for youth in informal settlements during the period of COVID-19, specifically on youth in informal settlements during COVID-19? Okay. Shruti, do you have some comments on this?
Yeah, I think so. When we talk about women informal workers, so they are also youth. So it's also impacting them. There's also very interesting contrast between youth workers, young workers, and elderly people, because we are also observing that now there is this fear amongst the elderly women that now jobs there'll be only few jobs. So then they'll hire more young people and they'll not hire elderly people. So that's also a kind of observation that we had. And in terms of youth, there's also a kind of mental pressure amongst them to, go out and earn. So many youth to whom I was talking, they were sharing that, now we really don't think that we'll be able to continue our education. I think we'll be forced, especially girls will be forced to drop out from the school and give a hand in their earning at home. So these are some of the issues which youth are facing and can face more post lockdown. Yeah,
that's a great insight. Yes, really. It's going to adversely affect especially young women, and obviously if transport, public space, all of that kind of is under people will review, reimagine all of that, and which is definitely going to happen this post-COVID situation. This is obviously going to affect the youth in informal settlements this way. This is a very important very insightful thing you brought up. So I don't think we have more time for any more questions. I guess it has been a great session, and there has been lot of inputs in terms of, if I have to just quickly put all of that together, is kind of pinpointed something which has been a conversation on boundary walls for a long time, that how can we do away with boundary walls, because that's one of the a solid physical structure which has been blocking our visibility quotient in the cities, that if we can do away with boundary walls or make them transparent and fence them up or something like that, which has been there in the architectural discourse for quite some time, that how it is adversely affecting visibility in cities. Then Anupama has also pointed out very nicely that how boys and men should be the ambassadors of change. It's not really only a women's issue where only women should be struggling to resolve it and fighting and all of that. So it also has to be boys and men also should be ambassadors to change to this, then only the situation can improve for everyone. It's not only our problem, it's everybody's problem. And the T-Nagar project, I have seen a bit of the project, and Venu Gopal, like you talked about the project, that how a design intervention has made done well, has made people see that what a great street can be, what a complete street can be, and how people can use it and can enjoy the street. And the street becomes an inclusive street for everyone. So that's a great project, which some of you, if you haven't seen it, is it available anywhere to see? I mean, I saw it in a presentation.
Yes,
so, yeah.
On the RITDP website, we have multiple links of blogs and videos as well. I can just share one meanwhile on the chat box.
Yeah, if you can share it, it would be nice for everybody to see it, that it's a great project. Nilanju, thank you so much for, saying that, safe mobility is one of the central issues of women accessing public space, and how this post-lockdown only we will be able to understand that how this mobility patterns has really changed, what will really happen in our cities, since every city has inadequate public transport. It's still not trying to struggle with the numbers and the demand and the supply and all of that. And there is obviously a huge gap between how women and men use public transport. So those kind of things will obviously, we will slowly understand how it's coming, but it's for sure that after COVID-19, we will be re-looking at the cities. We will be re-looking at our consumption patterns, of our workflows, travel patterns, and everything. This conversation is going to be here for some time. And finally, as in Shruti, thank you from Jaguri. Thank you this gendering the smart city is also one of the projects which has amplified youth voices, and from this peripheral settlements in our cities, that they have amplified youth voices and brought them to the discussion of smart cities in India. And if some of you have, I don't know if some of you have seen the project, the blog is there, and I will share the link over there. You can go to the blog and see that how that project has has brought about positive change in terms of giving confidence to those women to be in public space and reclaim public space for themselves. Shruti from TAF, that gender sensitive project also, which we did in the 3 cities of Bihar, as well as the important point you raised about gender sensitivity, both Shruti and Shushma, which you raised the point about gender sensitivity in public transport, which is and driver and conductor training, which has really shown a really positive kind of effects in the way people use public transport and how women are gaining more confidence. But this is also true that the street character, like you said, the street character is going to is not really changed. The way men dominated the street, or the way women use street in a different way, that still is there, and it will be there for some time. Like you said, if one woman has gone out and there are no other women to be in there, what we say that if there are more women participation, streets will be safer. Now, if this distancing is bringing out singling somebody out, obviously the effects will be different in there. So yeah, so I guess I think everything we looked at a range of perspectives where how cities will be different, how cities are operating now, and how cities will be different in our post-COVID-19. I would like to thank everyone. It's really wonderful that all of you took time, and and speaking from your homes, we can all see that how each one of you, we are locked up, and still we are keeping a positive note to stay connected, stay safe, and going with that anthem. Thank you so much. And thank you from the entire Safety Pin team for agreeing to be with us, and thank you.
Thank you very much for having us.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you
so much everyone for attending, and thanks everyone.
Kalpana, would you like to say something? We still have, we are almost there.
No, I think we are done, but I think thank you to all the participants as well for asking so many questions and for giving your comments. We appreciate this dialogue. I think we do need to, I think, build alliances. So as you know, it's sort of, somebody has said there's going to be BC, before COVID, and after COVID. So, you know, it's going to actually change the way that things are being done. And we've learned through all these years, I think all of us, that only when we work together can we really bring about significant change. So I think for us, these webinars are a way to create those partnerships, to strengthen them. We have in SafetyPin worked with, I think, all of you who are a part of this in some way or the other. I encourage all the participants who came on board to keep in touch with us. You know, we do have a mailing list and a newsletter, and we would like to continue this conversation. And I'd just like to end by saying that May 12th, we're having the third edition of this webinar, Looking Back, Looking Forward, which will be again an international webinar where we're going to have speakers from the Caribbean, from Africa, and from other, and from Europe. Again, looking at how they have dealt with the issue, but really in terms of COVID and post-COVID. We know that public space, cities have been the center of COVID and of this pandemic, and therefore cities are going to have to reimagine themselves in some very significant ways. And I think we need to be part of that conversation. It was lovely to have young voices as part of this. I'm sorry I brought in my white hair at the end of it, but I am from SafetyPin side, we are delighted to have had all of you participants and panelists. And thank you, Riti, for chairing it, moderating this so well. Good evening to all of you.
Bye. Bye, guys. Keep in touch. Stay safe. Stay connected. Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye, everyone.